Hi everyone, Savannah here, and today we're drawing a spooky scarecrow glowing in the moonlight. Everything you need to follow along is linked down below. That includes the free brush set that I'm using in this video, the color palette, and the sketch template, all of which are free to download. Let's go ahead and jump right on in. The first thing we're going to do is change that background color, so click layers, click that background color layer, and in the palette section we're going to find the Scarecrow color palette and use that dark cyan blue color. Then create a new layer, bring it below the outline layer here, grab the square blend brush from my brush set, and we're going to grab these other two colors. We're going to do a dark blue green color and that green color. Now the dark blue green color I'm doing in the middle towards the top of the sky here, and that brighter green we're going to be doing towards the bottom of the screen, and the blue will be at the top. And we'll work on blending these three colors together, but I'm just kind of placing the color for now, and then I will blend in using those three colors. And then I'm also going to be using the colors that blend in between them. So as you can see, with the square blend brush, I have some colors blended in between, so I'll grab some of those colors to blend them out even further, just to make this look a little bit more blended. I do want to add a texture to this, which I will at the end of the drawing, and I'll show you which brush I use for that. But for now, we're just going to work on blending these colors together. And if you don't know to grab a color that's blended in between, just hold your finger down on the screen where you want that color, and it will grab that for you in the color picker. You'll see it in the top right, that is the color that it's selected. And then also this brush is pressure sensitive, so that's how we're able to grab these in between colors, because you can adjust the pressure sensitivity that you're using. So if you press harder, more of the pigment that you have selected is going to be visible. If you press lighter, it's going to blend much nicer with the color that's already on the image there. And so that's why we're kind of blending these colors in with that square blend brush, so that we can grab those colors in between. And just keep blending these colors until you're satisfied with how it looks, and then we'll move on to filling in the shape of the scarecrow. Now let's go ahead and create a new layer right above the layer we just worked on. Grab that dark cyan blue color, the circle brush, and we're going to fill in the shape of the scarecrow. Now I go a little bit further down on the edge here. We will cover this up with that grass that's kind of peeking up through, and you can see in the image in the bottom left what I'm talking about there. But just go a little bit further on the arms and the body than you anticipate, because we want to make sure that we do have some form of body there. So when we do add the grass, it's covered up, or at least we cover up as much as we want or can. But we're just going to trace it in, or trace it out, and then fill it in with this dark color. And then I'm going to add some kind of hay that's sticking out of the scarecrow as well, around the face and the neck and the arms, and we'll add that in here as well. And before I add the hay that's sticking out, I'm just going to touch up the edges really quickly before I move on, because I don't want to touch those up afterwards. I want to make sure it looks good to me first before I do that. And now I'm going to add in that hay. So I did turn the outline layer off as I was filling in the scarecrow, because I wanted to just make sure the shape looked good. But for this one, I liked a lot of the placement of where I put the hay that's sticking out. So I'm going to turn that outline layer back on, just as like a starting point. And then I do want to add a little bit more than what is in that template. So feel free to have fun with this. Add as much or as little hay that's sticking out of the scarecrow as you want. But once you're done with this, we'll move on to that next step. And I'm happy with how he's looking, so I'm going to add a new layer right above the Scarecrow. I'm using the same color that we used for the Scarecrow, but I'm going to switch to the square brush for this, and I'm going to add in the fence post here. Now, I'm not worried about the post and being too detailed. We're going to blur it out here. In fact, we're going to blur most of the scene out except for the Scarecrow, so don't worry about being too perfect with the lines or with the details on these because they will be blurred. But I am going to just do this all in one color, all in the same layer, and then I will add a little bit of color variation on the same layer when we go to add details to each of these layers. So again, don't worry about being too detailed. We're going to add a blurred effect. If you don't want to add a blurred effect, then feel free to go as detailed as you want to with this section. But for my final image, I wanted to have the grass and the fence to be blurred out, so you really focused it on that Scarecrow. And don't worry that we're using the same color that we used for the Scarecrow because we will lighten this up. We will add some brown to this fence as well. We're also going to very little lighten up the Scarecrow, specifically around the edges. And we're also going to add eyes again, as you can see in the bottom left image. But don't worry again about the color of this fence because we will add in other color details, so it's not going to blend in with the Scarecrow if you're worried about that. Now let's go ahead and create two new layers, one above the Scarecrow, one above the fence, and we're going to work on the tall grass here. Now with the area in front of the fence or above the fence, I'm going to grab the circle blend brush and one of the darker green colors, and I'm just going to start adding in some tall grass here. Now I use the circle blend brush because I wanted there to be a little bit of transparency there. I wanted to have a little bit of a softer look, and I didn't want it so harsh, kind of like how the fence is a little bit harsher. I wanted the grass to be a little bit softer, so you can play around with it. This is a pressure sensitive brush as well, so both the blend brushes are pressure sensitive, so you can kind of vary the pressure. Some of these grassy parts are a little bit more colored in than some of the others, so some of them are a little bit softer, some are a little bit harder, because I just varied my pressure that I used here. And so I'm just going to add in just one color is all I'm focusing on right now. We will add a little bit of color variation, but I'm focused on one color. I'm just doing that dark green color for this section, and then I'll do the same thing on the layer above the Scarecrow, but I'm actually going to grab a brown color. So I want the grassy area in front of the Scarecrow to be a little bit brighter, and the one closer to where you'd be potentially standing, I want that to be a little bit darker. One other thing that I'm going to do is just bring that grass bottom area up a little bit because we want to kind of hide the bottom half of the Scarecrow since we didn't do that. And so I just brought it up a little bit. I just grabbed a square brush to bring that up, and then I went back to that circle blend brush and I'm just dragging up that color up there to give more grassy areas and just kind of blend out that harsh line because I don't want that harsh line. You can also switch over, which I just did, to the smudge tool, still using that circle blend, for that smudge tool, I'm just kind of swiping the brush up and down in the same motion that we did the grassy area here, the tall grass here, just swiping up and down in that motion, and it helps blend those out a little bit better. And I'm going to do the same thing for this green section as well, because I want to bring that layer up a little bit higher as well. I didn't want to be too low. And then I'm going to do the same thing using that smudge tool, just bring up the color from the bottom that we added in here just a little bit more. And I didn't go too high with this front area because I still wanted the fence to be visible. I just did it more high in the back because, again, we wanted to kind of cover the bottom half of the scarecrow since we didn't design for that. If you want to do more details on the scarecrow, you can bring that down a little bit lower, but I didn't want there to be too many details for that scarecrow. I didn't want too much to be visible. I wanted to kind of be questioning, is the scarecrow walking? Are they stationary? What is going on with the scarecrow? So that's what I want to do here. And I went through and alpha locked all of those layers, and then I created a new layer right above the scarecrow, set it to clipping mask, and we're going to work on the eyes now. So I grabbed this red color from the color palette using the circle blend brush. I'm just going to very lightly add in a circle that's larger than the one that's in that template because I want there to be a little bit of this red glowiness off of the yellow eyes that we're going to use. And I did make them a little bit larger, so I grabbed a darker color that was blended between that red and the black that we used, or the dark blue that we used, and I'm just blending that out even further. So I'm making this very large in that red section, and then the outline that we have here, I'm using that for that yellow color because I want that to kind of stand out a little bit. So I'm filling in the yellow in that section there, and then I'm going to very lightly blend that out with the red, but I still want it to be very, very yellow. So I'm adding it with the circle brush, and then I'll go through with the circle blend brush just to go very lightly around the edge of it. And then I'm going to touch up around the red a little bit more as well because I want this to be a little spooky. I want the scarecrow to be menacing, and I don't, I wanted to add in more of that red glow to this. Now here I did add a little too bright of red. It was starting to get away from the yellow. I wanted more of that yellow to be the focal point here. So I added too much red here, but I toned it down with the darker colors that I have blended in. So between that red and that dark blue color, I just grabbed an in-between color and just started blending it out a little bit more to bring it down because it went a little too red for me. So I'm going to touch this up, and then once your eyes are looking how you want them, as spooky as you want them to be, we can move on to that next step. Now I'm really loving those eyes, so I'm going to move on. We're going to add a little bit of detail to the scarecrow. So go to the scarecrow layer, grab that dark green color, that circle blend brush, and we're just going to very lightly outline some of the areas of the scarecrow. Now I'm not going too heavy with this. I'm mainly just kind of giving the illusion of where the hat is, maybe a little bit on the face and the neck, and a little bit on the body as well, but very minimal details. Like I said, I don't want too many details. I want them to be a little bit spooky, not sure what you're seeing. Is this scarecrow? What is this? Very spooky, kind of that shadow off in the distance with these very glowy eyes. And so that's what I want to do here by adding in just a little detail, but not too much. Now I'm going to do the same thing but with the yellow and in slightly less sections. So I'm just going very lightly over some of the green areas. I'm going to add in some yellow to some of the hay here as well on the left side. So I went more light on the left side, and then I'll grab a slightly darker color for the hay. So one of the brown colors for the hay on the right side. And then I'm just going to tone down the body just a little bit. I went a little too heavy handed with the green, so I just want to tone that down. And now I think I'm done with the scarecrow for this image. So now it's just adding in details to our other sections. Let's start with the fence. I'm grabbing that dark red orange color, and I'm just going to add in some color here and there. Now you can be a little bit more detailed than I am going to be in this. I'm really just adding in where the edges of the posts are going to be, adding some variation on the boards that connects those two posts, just a little bit, because again we are going to blur this out, so we don't need to go as detailed. It's not going to show when you blur it out, but if you want to go more detailed and not blur it out, then you can definitely do that as well. And now I'm going to pull in a little bit lighter brown for this as well, just to give it a little bit more color variation. Even though it's going to be blurred, you're still going to see a little bit of these colors that will pull through. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that, and then we will work on the grass areas as well. Blur everything out, and then we'll add a little bit of texture to the background. Now I do want more grass, so I'm going to duplicate both of those layers, and I'm going to flip them horizontally. So just swipe left on that layer, click duplicate, and then click that pointer and flip horizontal. And then what I'm going to do is merge those new layers with the original layers we have. So that way I can add in details to one layer instead of worrying about two. So I'll merge the two green layers, and I'll merge those two brown, yellowy, orange layers together. And then I'm going to actually turn the alpha lock off on both those layers so I can add a little bit more color variation on both those layers. Then we'll set back to alpha lock, add some more details, blur everything out like I mentioned, and then we'll be done pretty close to with this image. But I'm just adding in, so again I'm doing darker colors for the front area here, so I'm doing a darker brown to go with that green, and then I'll do slightly lighter colors for that layer below it. But we're going to just keep adding in a little bit of color variation, but again, you don't have to be too detailed. It's going to get blurred out, so don't worry about being detailed with all of this. It's going to get blurred. Now that we have more of this grassy area poking up, we can set those layers back to alpha lock, and then I'm going to grab some colors to add color variation to both the layers. So I'm going to add some yellow to that layer to the background. I'll add some lighter colors to the green layer in the front as well, just to give it more color variation. But I just want to add in a little bit here before we start doing the Gaussian blur on these. And you don't necessarily have to add in as many colors as I'm doing. You can stick to a few colors if you want to. I'm just adding in quite a few. But if you don't want to add in too many, you can move on to the next steps, which is the Gaussian blur on these 3 layers. So the 2 grass layers and then the fence layer. But I'm just going to add in a few more colors before I do that. Now, before we can do a Gaussian blur, make sure you turn the alpha lock layer off for these 3 layers, and then go into the adjustments, go into Gaussian blur, and drag it to the side to the blur that you want. I'm just gonna do a little bit. I do usually around about 5 to 10%. I don't usually go above 10%. It just gets too blurry for me, but I'm gonna go between 5 and 10% for the layers and just blur them out a little bit. And it's already looking much better. That scarecrow is really popping through on this image. Now, one of the last things I want to do is add texture to that background, and I'm going to brighten up a little bit the background as well. So I'm grabbing that green color, I'm working on that background layer, and I'm just going to lighten it up. And then I do have a textured brush, a square texture brush that I'm going to be using over the top of this because I just needed something a little bit more textured in this image, especially up in the sky. It was looking very plain to me and I wanted some color variation. So I'm just kind of touching up the main colors here, and then I'm going to go into my brush set. It is, again, all my brushes are free for you to download. Link is in the description, but I'm going to use this textured square brush, starting with that green, just adding in some of that texture here over that area, and bring it up a little bit into the dark area. And then I'm going to do the same thing with that dark area as well, just again to give it a little bit more texture. Now, if you want more texture to show, it doesn't show right now with the blue because we're doing that blue texture on blue texture. You could pull that darker green color up into the blue area and then go back over that with that blue color, but I just really wanted the texture to be behind the scarecrow. And then I did actually end up doing a very small Gaussian blur on this as well, because I didn't want to be too textured, but I wanted just a little bit textured. So I just did a little bit here, nothing too crazy. I did about 3% for that blur. And now with that, we're done with our image. Thanks so much for sketching along with me today. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think the scarecrow is guarding out there in that field. I'll see everyone in the next video.